All right, what's going on, everybody? We have a special guest today, Ron Hudnell. Am I saying that correct, sir?
Yes, you are.
All right. So Ron was introduced via mutual friend, Eric, and he's working on a really cool project right now. So Sayer and I thought it'd be a lot of fun to talk to Ron, learn about that, and hopefully spread the word a little bit. So Ron, thank you very much for being here.
You're certainly welcome. Appreciate the invitation.
And would you mind, before we dive, I think we got a lot to talk about, but would you mind just a quick background on yourself, who you are, and kind of what you're working on?
All right. Well, I spent my elementary and high school years in North Carolina. Then I decided to go to West Point, graduated in 1969, which I think is about 40 years before you.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
So anyway, I went to Airborne and Ranger School after West Point, like the rest of my classmates. And then I went to Engineer Officer Basic Course to Germany, Combat Engineer, Company Commander. After the Army said I would not be going to Vietnam, I wrote my fiance and said, let's go ahead and plan the wedding. We did that, got back to Germany, and then they said, well, you've gotten your orders for Vietnam. So we only spent 3 months together there, went to Fort Bragg for Special Forces School, to Vietnam, construction company commander there, and then returned to the States for the advanced course, and then decided to get out of the Army. So that's a short summary of my Army experience. 1984, I'm not sure how much detail you want, but in 1984, 40 years anniversary of D-Day, my dad called me up and said he had learned about the Ranger Battalions Association, which was the World War II Ranger Battalions Association. They were having a meeting up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania. Wanted to know if I wanted to go, but really what he wanted was for me to take him up there. So anyway, he and I drove up to the Poconos and met these guys who he had not seen for 40 years. He had not had any contact at all with the Rangers since he was wounded at Brest. They all saw him taken away, taken back to England to a hospital. They did not know that he had even lived. So we got a chance to meet some of his D Company, 2nd Ranger Battalion buddies there. I don't know if you know much about Pointe du Hoc or not, but Lynn Lamel is a big name with Pointe du Hoc, and so is Jack Kuhn. So both of them were there in the meeting, as well as other guys he had not seen, so he had a chance to meet them. There were a couple of book authors there, Bob Black, who wrote sort of a history of the Ranger Battalions, all 6 of them, and Ron Lane, who had written a book. He was a West Point graduate also. He had written a book about Rudder's Rangers, about specifically the 2nd Ranger Battalion. So he was also there. So we met a lot of my dad's buddies. And so that was 1984. And no real contact after that. I think he joined some of the World War II Ranger Associations chapters, excuse me, in the Southeast. He never, excuse me, never attended a national meeting though. So the next contact was in 2002 when I saw a West Point magazine that had a small paragraph in the back where they do their ads, and they said they were looking for descendants of World War II Rangers who had gone to West Point. And so heard about that, went down to New Orleans for a reunion planning session that they had there. And then September of that year, we had the reunion. I met a lot of the descendants, and again, a lot of my dad's buddies from D Company, 2nd Ranger Battalion at that reunion. And so that was 2002. And then my next big event was 2012. I retired. And in 2012, I started getting really actively involved with the World War II Rangers. Worked with them on their website, worked with them on their newsletter. I started, along with another lady, we started a database for all the World War II Rangers. We kept getting inquiries from descendants, sometimes alleged descendants. And so we started this database so that people could just go online to see if their relative was a World War II Ranger or not. And it sort of took the pressure off of us saying, no, I don't think he was a World War II Ranger at all, despite what he may have told you. So we started that in 2003 timeframe. And then in 2012, I got involved with a Facebook site for World War II Rangers and Descendants, and sort of created, I helped create that network of descendants, mostly descendants, but some friends, some people from France and England and Italy who wanted to be in the organization. So that was 2012. And since then, it's been just pretty active activity, doing lots of stuff with World War II Rangers, both Rangers and the descendants. So that's a short history.
That was a lot. That was impressive. Both your career, your father's, and what you've done after. You sent over an awesome read ahead here on some things about the World War II Rangers. Am I seeing correctly that there were about 7,000 total?
There are about 7,000. There are 7 World War II Ranger battalions. The 1st through the 6th were all of the authorized TO&E battalions. There was another battalion that was formed in 1943, late 42, early 43, the 29th Provisional Ranger Battalion. The 29th Infantry Division was stationed in England at the time. The 1st had already gone through the training with the commandos there in Scotland. The decision was made, well, I think the 29th Infantry Division made the decision themselves to create this Ranger Battalion. And again, it was never authorized. They never saw combat as a full battalion. They conducted a number of raids in the islands in the English Channel. They also did some raids in Norway, but they never fought as a complete battalion. And then when the 2nd and the 5th Ranger Battalions were being formed at Camp Forest in Tullahoma, Tennessee, then the Army of the 29th Infantry Division was told to deactivate that unauthorized battalion. So there are 7 battalions, about 7,000 soldiers volunteered for those 7 battalions.
That's a tight-knit group. 7,000 kind of sounds like a lot, but all things considered, that would have been smaller. Yeah, that's about half the size of a division in the war. Is that about?
Probably a little bit less than half the size of a division. And most of the Ranger battalions, the Ranger companies, were about half the size of a regular infantry company and battalion. Even though the missions that they were given were sort of similar to what a regular company infantry battalion would have been given, their size was about half that strength, and they didn't have nearly the armaments, the firepower that the full battalions had.
How are they recruiting into these Ranger battalions as compared, like, because we know about like the paratroopers, the Band of Brothers type stuff, but there was no Ranger school back then. There were no Ranger regiment didn't exist. So like, what were people thinking they were joining when they heard of like Ranger Battalion? How did people get to the spot, and then kind of the training to get there?
Well, I think what happened, we'll start with the 1st Ranger Battalion that was formed in June of 1942. Darby had been an aide-de-camp for the commanding general for the 34th Infantry Division out of the Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota area, the Red Bull Division. He had been the aide-de-camp for the general when they got to Ireland. General Truscott, or I think he was a colonel at the time, Colonel Truscott, had been told to see what the British commandos were doing, and that possibly a similar type unit would be formed in the American Army. They formed the 1st Ranger Battalion. Darby was appointed the battalion commander. Once he had the officers selected, then they went to units that were there in Ireland and Scotland and England at that time, which primarily was the 34th. And I think the 1st Infantry Division was there then. So they went to those units telling their story about the elite group that the Rangers were going to be. And then they just got volunteers. And, you had to pass a sort of physical standards and medical standards. And there was also some age limits there. But assuming that the soldiers met all of those qualifications and were accepted into the 1st Ranger Battalion after that. So that's primarily how they initially did the recruiting. I think later on, probably, and I'm speaking for myself now, the standards got lowered somewhat. As soldiers were injured, as soldiers died in combat, they went to replacement depots and pull soldiers into the Ranger Battalions. My dad did not start out in the 2nd Ranger Battalion in Tennessee when they were formed. He went to England with the 28th Infantry Division. And because he had had some training in mountain climbing down in West Virginia, some water training off the coast of Norfolk there, I think they were interested in him. And there had been some injuries in the training of the 2nd Ranger Battalion in England at that time. And maybe some guys decided they didn't want to be in the Rangers. I'm not sure about that, but I know there were some injuries. So they went to the 28th Infantry Division recruiting to see who met their standards. And so that's how he got in. I think it was primarily, there were standards that they were trying to meet. And they were talking to those soldiers about the kinds of missions that the Rangers would be engaged in, and that they were, a special group. So.
And it still carries true to this day, because obviously they're the genesis of it. But if you do think about because I didn't know that story, by the way, because it's just not one that's told that often, really. You know about them Point du Hoc and everything, but not sort of the history of it. It's not as well known as sort of some of the other stories that that we know about, just as amateur historians, if you will. But it's like the first paragraph of the Ranger Creed, which came years and years later, recognizing that I'm a specially selected and well-trained soldier. So It sounds like that's how those people, how everybody, you had to cut the mustard from somebody vouching for you, which in some ways is harder than passing some sort of obstacle course or timed ruck march.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there were some guys who may not have met the qualifications. I know there's a story about one Ranger who had false teeth, and either Darby or Rudder one had said to him, well, because of that medical condition, you're not going to be allowed into the Ranger unit. And this guy said, well, sir, I'm not going to bite them, I'm going to kill them. So he was able to get in. And I think there are probably other stories like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a special group, very special group, then as well as now. Unfortunately now, I think I mentioned to you there are only 19 of them who are still with us. And most of them are not in good medical condition. There are a couple that are really alert, but most of them are not as alert. So.
When we, at a high level, look back at World War II, you'd mentioned the 6 Ranger battalions and then the 29th. We've got the 2nd and the 5th on D-Day. You've got the 6th, the raid at Cabanatuan in the Pacific. There's 3 other Ranger battalions in there that I feel like are glossed over a little bit in World War II. But they were active. They all saw combat, correct?
Yes, they did. Please don't tell that to my classmate, Roy Murray, whose father was the commander of the 4th Ranger Battalion. He gets upset all the time. He thinks they don't get enough credit. The 1st Ranger Battalion was formed in June of 1942. They trained at the British Commando School. They took 50 of those soldiers before they had finished their training, and they sent them to go with the Canadians and the British on the Dieppe raid, which was pretty much a total disaster. 3 Rangers were killed in action on that mission. After that, the entire 1st Ranger Battalion went to North Africa. They landed at the Arzu in the entry into North Africa. They fought across North Africa until they got to Algeria and Nemours, Nemours. And then at that time, Darby had petitioned to form 2 other Ranger battalions and form the Ranger Force, which would be, like a mini Ranger regiment with 3 battalions. He was finally given approval to do it, but instead of having total replacements coming in, he was told to take the 1st Ranger Battalion and divide it into 3 segments with 2 companies each. So 2 companies would stay with the 1st Ranger Battalion, 2 companies would go to the 3rd, 2 companies would go to the 4th, and then they would backfill with replacements to get the battalion back up to full strength. So then right after that, this was in April, May timeframe 43. Then right after that, in July of 43, all 3 battalions landed at Sicily, at Gela, Sicily, and then fought across Sicily and into the boot of Italy. And then their next landing was at Salerno. Again, all 3 Ranger battalions landed there. And then from there, they went to Anzio in late January of 44, I'm sorry, in 44. And they landed January the 22nd. A week later, Darby was given the mission to capture a communications crossroads where rail and highway network were crossing a key point. And the intelligence said that it was lightly held by the Germans. Prior to the kickoff on January 30th, the Germans brought in another division. And so the Rangers were surprised by the extra forces that the Germans had brought in. The 1st and the 3rd were leading the infiltration to Cisterna. The 4th was in reserve. And then the 1st and the 3rd basically were cut off. Most of them were captured, some were killed, some escaped, but the 1st and 3rd were pretty much decimated after the Cisterna operation. And the 4th had been trying on the night of the 30th to get through to try and save the 1st and 3rd, but they were not able to. So they didn't have the armaments and the support to do that. So after that, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 4th, the 1st and 3rd were pretty much gone, but the ones who were left over went into the 4th. And then they took the soldiers from the Rangers from the 4th who had enough points and time overseas, and they sent them back to the US. The rest of the soldiers were sent to either Camp Buckner, North Carolina, and sent to other units, or they went to the 1st Special Service Force, and they fought through the rest of the war.
Now, who would a Ranger battalion report to in the conflicts? Or so like what level asset were they, if that makes sense?
Well, most of the time they were attached to another division.
Okay.
So in Normandy, I can probably talk more about Normandy since that's where my father was. But in Normandy, a lot of the times they were attached to the 29th Infantry Division, which, came from Eastern Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania area.
And that's similar to how I understand, I don't want to get too far off track, but how I understand the Ranger battalions worked in Vietnam, they were companies attached to divisions.
Exactly right.
Okay.
They were, I think, called Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol Companies.
Yeah.
But each of the divisions had a Ranger company. I think most of the divisions had a Ranger company attached to them.
Okay, that's how I understand it.
Hey,
real quick, I got to say something real quick. Hey, I caught myself. I screwed Ranger Creed up. When I said, I have to correct myself now. Specially selected well-trained soldier is in the creed, but the first paragraph is about volunteering, recognizing I volunteered as a Ranger. So, hey, but that still rings true for these guys as well. But I was thinking about it. All right, well, I will get scuffed up. I would scuff myself up if I heard that. So I have to correct it.
I'm going to edit out that correction. I'm only going to hear the first part.
Oh, man. Bring in the comments.
Yeah, when I went to Ranger School, I don't think we had the Ranger Creed then because I don't remember it, but I go to
it's newer.
I go to a lot of the Hall of Fame ceremonies down at Fort Benning, and always impressed at the end of that when all the Rangers stand up and recite the Ranger Creed word for word. I mean, it's very impressive.
Yeah, it's we had, honestly, I did ROTC and we had to do it, and we had this used to be able to go to Ranger School as a cadet. Yep. And anyway, this legacy program where it trained cadets to one day go to Ranger School, we didn't get rid of it when cadets weren't allowed to go anymore because you couldn't in my era. But Ohio State kept the program alive. But anyway, I ended up being like the cadet RI, if you will. And that's a big part of it, is memorizing that Ranger Creed. So the fact I'm screwing it up, not cool. But hey, that was a while ago, right?
We won't tell anybody.
All righty.
When you went to Ranger School after West Point, did you, I know the further we get from something, we can look back and recognize its importance, but did you recognize the historical aspect of that tied to your family, or was it just the thing you do after you commission?
Well, unfortunately, I did not. Growing up, my dad did not talk much about Ranger School or the Army. I mean, I still have memories of, him having flashbacks and not really nightmares, but, struggles and memories of combat in Europe. And I checked the West Point. I'm not sure when you had military art there if they still had this, but West Point Atlas of American Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Did they have that?
Yeah.
So I checked that book a couple of times to see what they said about Pointe du Hoc and the Rangers, and they said nothing at all about either one.
Wow.
So I was a little disappointed about that. And I didn't check about the 1st, 3rd, and 4th and the 6th Ranger Battalions in their operations. I only checked Normandy. But in any case, my dad didn't talk very much about the war and Rangers at all. He had some German stuff that he had brought back after World War II, and I do remember seeing that. I wish I had talked to him earlier on when his memory was better about what he had gone through. He joined the Rangers in England after the 2nd had already arrived. He trained with them in England. He got on the landing craft, crossing the English Channel. And again, if you know anything about the Pointe du Hoc operation, you know that some of those landing craft did not make the beach. His was one of those. And they had 20 or 22 people, soldiers in that landing craft. It sank in the channel long before they got to the beach, and the ships and other landing craft were told not to stop on the approach to the beach and pick up survivors. So they floated in the water for a long time. When they were picked up, because there was a possibility of hypothermia, all of the survivors, there were 3 or 4 that drowned, but the rest of the survivors were taken to England for about a week and a half, 2 weeks of treatment for hypothermia. And so he rejoined the Rangers in Cherbourg, and then he fought with them from Cherbourg through to Brest in the operation there. He was wounded in Brest near the end of August, taken back to England, and his injuries were severe enough that he did not rejoin the Rangers. And I've never gotten that part of the story completely straight from him. And it's too late now because it's past. But I don't think he was really that enthusiastic about rejoining the Rangers, since he felt like he had tempted fate a couple of times there.
Sure.
But in any case, he did not rejoin them. He joined a construction engineer company from about December of 44 until the end of the war. But he never talked about it. That's the reason in 84, when he wanted to go visit, this Northeast chapter of the World War II Rangers Association, I was a little shocked, but it was so heartwarming to see those guys gathered together like it was yesterday. It'd been 40 years, and these guys were just hugging each other and so glad to see each other. Just absolutely great. And he and I did a couple of World War II Ranger-related activities after that. In 2006, we went to Normandy. My mother had Alzheimer's, so when she passed, and he didn't have the responsibility of caring for her, we went to Normandy because he wasn't able to touch the sand on his first trip over, so he wanted to go to the beach. And so we went to the beach, and we found a tour group there that would take him around. And the guys in the tour group were absolutely fighting to be able to, escort and tour a World War II Ranger around. and the people there in France were just so welcoming, to the American soldiers. And my dad, I would say he was not a very affectionate person, but he absolutely loved the attention that he was getting. So I'm sorry, you started out saying about my dad and
The history there. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So anyway, 2006, we went to Normandy. 2007, we went to Ranger Rendezvous at Benning, and he saw again some of his friends there, some he had not seen before. There's actually one soldier who had been in the 28th Infantry Division, recruited in England like my dad had been. So those two guys just sort of bonded. We went up to Pennsylvania. They have a big military show in Pennsylvania in the fall of every year. So he was able to see Lynn Lamel again. Lynn Lamel at this time, again, this would have been 2007. Lynn was having some dementia problems. And so that was the last time the two of them saw each other. And then he saw Bob Black there. Bob had just written his book, The Battalion, about the 2nd Ranger Battalion. So he gave us an autographed copy of that. And I think we also went to D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia in 2007. So 2007 was a big year for us. And he ended up passing in December of 2007. So it was a big year.
Do you think it sounds like 1984 was the first time he was really ready to start re-engaging?
I don't
You think it just took 40 years?
I'm not sure if it took the 40 years or it was just the fact that he saw this announcement. I think it may have been in like an American Legion magazine or a VFW magazine where they have, the reunion information in the back of them. He may have seen that. I think he may have had some contacts with Rangers that somehow he just accidentally bumped into. I'm not sure, but he possibly was not ready to do it any sooner than then. But I'm glad he did it then, and glad that he was able to do the other activities that he did and brought me into them.
I get excited when I cross paths with somebody that, we were just in the Army at the same time 6 years ago. I can't imagine the emotion of running into somebody 40 years later that you're in combat with. That's incredible.
Well, I can tell you, it's a tearjerker. I mean, I was crying the way that he was meeting and hugging and talking to his Ranger buddies from France. So.
Do you know how involved, you said that there was that like the Northeast chapter of the World War II Rangers. Do you know how that organization got up and running? Was it years later? Was it, because I know the Band of Brother guys, I think they started meeting in 46. So it was like, they did it the whole time, but I don't know about other units and that might be part of the history reason why we don't know a lot of these stories.
Well, I'm not sure how open those histories are. I know that the Ranger Battalions Association started either in 46, I think it was 47 though, 46 or 47, but pretty soon after the war ended. They started annually getting together at reunions around the country and sometimes offshore, taking trips over to France and to England to revisit places they had been, to Italy. And then because it was such a large organization at that time, and they were meeting once each year or every other year, they formed local chapters. So they had 6 or 7 chapters around the country. I know they had one in the Northeast, they had one in the Southeast, they had one in Texas. At Texas A&M is where General Rudder was from. They had one in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Darby was from. So they had 6 or 7 of them around the country. I mean, the chapters, as the World War II Ranger ranks diminished, the chapters went away. So there are no chapters today.
Right.
There's still the organization that I sent you, Preston, the World War II Ranger Descendants Organization, which is the official organization. We get together once a year now. The descendants and just a handful of Rangers The last one we did was at Gettysburg in 2019.
Wow.
And we had 3 World War II Rangers there. We couldn't do one in 20 or 21 because of the COVID protocols. Frequently, we will do one in Fort Benning, but we're trying to spread it out, but a lot of them are at Fort Benning. So the Descendants of World War II Rangers, Inc. organization, the official organization, is the successor to the Ranger Battalions Association. In 2012, the Ranger Battalions Association had so few members, they wanted an organization of descendants to carry on the legacy. So, and we already had at that time an official organization called the Sons and Daughters of World War II Rangers. So that group merged with the few remaining members of the RBA and formed the Descendants of World War II Rangers, Inc.
Interesting. And the other question I have, I'm always just curious about the transition, what it was like, because we've all gone through it. Your dad with World War II, yourself Vietnam, and then Preston and I with the more recent stuff. And they're just different eras and times. And I just wondering, like, your dad, you said he didn't talk about it. He wasn't in a Ranger Association group, but like, was he a VFW guy? Was he American Legion? Was he associated with veterans?
He was.
Like what you remember as a kid?
Well, I don't remember it as a kid, but I do know that he was a lifetime member of the VFW in his hometown of Roxborough and my mother's hometown up in Southern Virginia. So he was a lifetime member of the VFW. And then once he found out about the official Ranger Battalions Association, he became a lifetime member of that. He just, to my knowledge, he didn't do, I mean, he may have done VFW before that. I just don't know.
Ron, you kind of glossed over in your introduction. Your dad's history is awesome and what he's been tied in with. And you very quickly moved through Ranger School, Special Forces School, Vietnam. Did I hear correctly that you were a construction company commander in Vietnam for the Special Forces? Is that?
I was. When I got to Vietnam, because I had just gotten out of Special Forces School, I asked if I could go to a Special Forces unit there. I absolutely loved Special Forces, more so than Ranger School. Special Forces is sort of a gentleman's Ranger school. But in any case, I like Special Forces and asked to get into the Special Forces unit in Vietnam. And I was told, we don't have any Special Forces units now in Vietnam, or that my rank, because I was a captain at the time, was not appropriate for any openings that they may have had. So I couldn't get to a Special Forces unit. So I had, since I branched engineer at West Point, they put me into a construction company in the Delta area of South Vietnam. So I ran that company until for 3 or 4 months. And then the commanding general for all of the engineer troops in Vietnam was looking for an aide de camp. The battalion commander said, I think you would be a great candidate for that. So I went up to Long Binh and interviewed with him and was selected to be the aide de camp, which I did from November of 71 until April of 72. And then he was pulled out, sent back to the States. A brigadier general stepped up, but because I was a captain, I was overranked for the aide de camp job. So they sent me to the advanced course a little earlier than I had anticipated.
That's a unique experience.
It is. The SF thing, I'm curious. You did the full course in North Carolina, like Q course, all the like Robin Sage, all that?
I did. Everything was in Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
This would have been let's see, April through June of 71. But we did do the Robin Sage activity there. I still have fond memories of some of the things that happened in that class. And I tell the children and the grandchildren every chance I get. Everything was in North Carolina. So,
yeah,
Fort Bragg.
That's cool. Yeah, my uncle did. See, he's your same era, and it's one of those things. I don't know everything. You don't know a lot about it, and then it's quite confusing because I don't understand Vietnam as much as I think I do. But he was around a 69 grad. He did OCS though. And he did SF, but it was like this correspondence sort of thing, sort of churn and burn to like, he was a infantry platoon leader, and then he did some sort of correspondence, and then he was an SF kind of team leader sort of guy out in the bush, but he did not do the North Carolina thing.
So everything I did in North Carolina was either in the classrooms there or out in the field. And as I remember, we did 2 or 3 field exercises. We did jump into the areas that we were going to, which concerned me a little bit because I hadn't jumped for a couple of years, and it gave me about a 30-minute reintroduction into parachuting and pushed us out of the plane. So,
wow.
No, but everything was there. No correspondence.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's what I figured. That's what I assumed with most people would have been that, but it's just a crazy time with just everything going on with you.
Yeah, I think at that time, I mean, this would have been 69 for Ranger School and 71 for Special Forces. Vietnam was still pretty active, and I think they were pushing people through both those courses as fast as they could get them through and appropriately graduated.
Sure.
Did you
go ahead? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say you know, your father was 40 years before he really tied back in with some of his old teammates. What was that like for you? Did that influence? Did you tie back in with guys that you served with in Germany and Vietnam or anything like that?
Well, not so much Vietnam, but Germany. The 8th Company of the 547th Engineer Battalion, we still have a group that gets together. Nice. The officers in the battalion. I get together with my B2 company classmates from West Point. In fact, we're doing a Zoom meeting on Sunday evening with those guys. But Vietnam guys, because I was in the engineer unit there such a short time, and then an aide-de-camp position, didn't really form the ties in Vietnam. I do have one engineer classmate who went through the Special Forces school with me, who stayed in the Army, retired as lieutenant colonel. So I just got an email from him yesterday saying, when you come up to Fort Belvoir, we can go visit the Museum of the Infantry, Army Museum of the Infantry. So get a chance to see that. So some connections, but not as much as maybe I should.
It's, I think it's like it, the people I know that were in Vietnam, the buddies I have, it just seems so tricky because let's say you're a friend of mine named Bob he was a rifle PL, platoon leader for 101st. And it's just, so he would have done the deployment, yes, but just the way the people rotated in and out as individuals, not training up. It's like everybody was a replacement, which is just, it seems like such a unique time frame for like war fighting, as compared to like units training up and deploying as we have now and everything like that. I mean, he said they didn't even talk until like the 90s or something. So same thing with him. It almost took 30, 40 years in a way to get everyone back together, but they could probably, because they were all together for at least certain parts over 12 months, but it was still probably very hard for them because they didn't know each other at all before. And people just coming and going all the time. It just seemed real unique to that Vietnam era timeframe.
Well, I think Vietnam was different than Iraq and Afghanistan in that Vietnam, you're right. They initially deployed as a unit, but after that, it was just when they de-rose back to the U.S., somebody else would come in. So yeah, totally different, I think.
Now we got to make sure we have time to talk about this massive effort you're working on, Ron.
Please.
I need to know more about this. I don't know a whole lot about the Congressional Gold Medal at baseline, but it does sound like there's progress right now in what you're working on.
There is progress. Well, let me give you just a little bit of history. Remember, I said that some of the Rangers transferred to the 1st Special Service Force in March, April of 1944. Mm-hmm. So when I joined the Facebook group in 2012, the guy who had started the Facebook group, his father had been in the 4th Ranger Battalion, and then his father had transferred to the 1st Special Service Force. at that time, there was a first Special Service Force Association, which had been working to get the Congressional Gold Medal awarded to the force guys. And so I found out a lot about that from him. He and I became, I mean, despite the fact he was a Navy guy, we became very good friends. And, you know, I helped him with the Facebook site. And I mean, we were messaging many times a day. And so I learned a little bit about the Congressional Gold Medal, which I really did not know very much, if anything, about before then. But anyway, the first Special Service Force was trying to get the Congressional Gold Medal. They finally got it, I think, passed into public law in 2013. And then I think sometime in 2015, they had their ceremony. At that time, I was not an officer in the descendants of World War II Rangers. So I just made a suggestion to the president of the association saying, you know, this is something that the Rangers, World War II Rangers should have, is a Congressional Gold Medal also. What do we need to do? And I was getting a little bit of pushback. Not sure why, but in case I did, but I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And then that president left position. Another president came in who was much more interested in the Congressional Gold Medal, but didn't have any of the context, nor did I. So finally, we found Senator Ernst in Iowa. And one of the last original Darby Rangers was living in Des Moines at the time. And so I think she adopted the Congressional Gold Medal project because of Lester Cook. Lester was an original Darby Ranger. He got a Silver Star in World War II. He got a Silver Star during Korea. So 2 Silver Stars. Just an awesome guy. Absolutely awesome guy. And so she, I think, introduced the Senate bill because of Lester Cook, or in honor of him. And she found a representative to introduce the companion bill in the House. And you have to have a Senate bill and a House bill. They both have to say the same thing. They both have to get 2/3 majority in their branches to be then submitted for an approval vote. Once both the House and the Senate approve their bills, then the bill goes to the president for signature into public law. So in 2015, listen, let me get my years right. 2016, we introduced, or Senator Ernst introduced a bill in the 115th session of the Congress in the Senate, and a representative from Tennessee, whose name escapes me now, introduced the same bill in the House. But they did it in June of 2016. And they only had 6 months left to get the 2/3 majorities in both the Senate and the House. And almost nothing was done.
Okay.
We were not well organized ourselves and didn't really understand that, you know, if you don't get the bills passed, then it has to start from scratch again. You know, if we'd done a better job in civics, we probably would have learned that, but we didn't. So in 2018, the bill was reintroduced in the Senate by Senator Ernst again, and this time in the House by Representative Crenshaw in Texas, who is the SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
And the Senate version got approved. It got its 2/3 majority of co-sponsors, so it was approved in the Senate. Representative Crenshaw's bill in the House got about 50% of the co-sponsors required to move it forward. So it died in 2019. So in 2020, I'm sorry, I'm getting my years all mixed up, but anyway, on the
a lot of dates.
Yeah, it is. On the third try in 2021, Senator Ernst reintroduced the bill a third time. And then this time it has passed. It just passed a week or so ago. And with 74 senators co-sponsoring, we only needed 67. So that side of the equation is solved. We're working on the House side right now. And Representative Jason Crow, who's an Army Ranger, Colorado, introduced the bill in the House. That bill, as of this morning, had 155 co-sponsors, and we need 290. So we're a little over halfway, but we're in the first year as opposed to the second year of the session of Congress. So we have all of next year to get the 135 still required and to get it before the president so he can sign it into public law. The problem now is next year, representatives who get reelected every 2 years are really concentrating will be concentrating next year on their reelection campaigns. And so not as focused on something like congressional gold medals. That's one issue. The second issue is Congress almost by, I won't say design or default, but they typically only pass 3 to 7, 8 at most congressional gold medals per year. If you look now, if you go to congress.gov and type in congressional gold medals, you will see that there are about 40 of them under consideration. Now, some of them only have 1 or 2 co-sponsors, so it's going nowhere. Some of them, they're on the 3rd or 4th attempt like we are. So hopefully we will get there, and hopefully there will still be room in the max number that they want to approve that we'll be able to get ours approved this time. Again, I mentioned earlier, we only have 19 World War II Rangers still left with us. Once the bill, I'm assuming the bill is going to pass. Once it passes, it goes through a design process. There are a couple of artistic committees in Washington that have the responsibility for designing that gold coin. That process takes over a year. So if you look at where we are today, it may be 2 years before it will actually be presented at a ceremony in DC. So my goal is to get the remaining 135 representatives to co-sponsor the bill in the House, to at least get it before the president so he can sign it. I think President Biden will sign it, the minute it lands on his desk. And then we can say, once it's public law, the gold coin, the congressional gold coin, has been awarded to World War II Rangers. They may not have received it in a ceremony, but it's been awarded. And hopefully, that's going to be within the next year. And hopefully there will be some of those 19 World War II Rangers still with us who can celebrate that accomplishment with their families. There are a couple of guys, as I mentioned earlier, that are very alert. And we just got a call this morning or an email this morning. CNN is interested in where we are with the project. Awesome. They want a spokes. Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. Came away from that, my hands were shaking. But there's a guy there's a World War II Ranger down in Florida, John Ron. I think I may have mentioned him to you, Preston. He's the last man in the class of January of '43 at West Point. So everybody else has passed away. John Ron was a captain of a headquarters company, 5th Ranger Battalion on D-Day, and led his guys onto the shore at Omaha Beach. And that guy, physically, he's got maybe some joint problems, but mentally, he is so alert. You can ask him a question about what the guys were wearing and why weren't they doing this and why did they have camouflage netting on their helmets and what were the markings on the helmets. And the guy's just so alert and sharp. It just amazes me that he can do that. He's 99 years old. Wow. But he is a good spokesman for us. And, when I first said, how would you like to be interviewed and you'll get a little bit of attention out of this. And he said, well, I really don't want any attention. I'm only doing this so that the rest of the guys will get this award. And if I can help with that, I'm more than willing to do it. Fantastic guy. Some of the others are not as good a spokesman as John Ron would be. Sure. But if you go online and Google John Ron Jr., World War II, Omaha Beach, you'll see all kinds of articles about him.
this Congress and politics confuses me, because this seems like something that would be a slam dunk. Like if somebody's coming up for reelection, why wouldn't they want their name on this? It's such a wonderful project, but clearly I don't know much about how Washington works. What can Sayer and I or anybody listening do to help with the effort of getting this pushed through?
Well, publicize the fact that we need representatives to co-sponsor the House bill, which is HR 3577. All people have to do is call in to their representative and say, I'm interested in this bill. I've got some friends who were World War II Rangers, or I know some World War II Rangers, or I just think it's the right thing to do. But I want you to co-sponsor the House bill, HR 3577. The more exposure we can get. I am not a one-man band here. There are other people working on this besides me, but yesterday I sent out 294 emails personalized to each representative's office, to a staffer there. And, each time I do this, and this is the second time I've done it, but each time I do it, I'll get 7 or 8 of they're either the legislative assistant or the military liaison folks in the representative's office, and they will say, well, thank you very much for flagging this for me. We're not aware of this, and we'll jump right on it. And they do. But, it's not something that's constantly in front of them. So they need to be constantly reminded that this bill still needs to be co-sponsored. I won't admit that I understand how Washington works either, or doesn't work. But in any case, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that you have to have a 2/3 majority of co-sponsors so it can be submitted to the full House or the full Senate, so that the full House or the full Senate can vote by a 2/3 majority. You would think it would be a little simpler than that, but those are the rules. And I think there are some special circumstances that they short circuit that, but they tend to adhere to it pretty rigorously. I think that 2/3 majority have to co-sponsor saying we think it ought to be voted on. So then they have the vote, they approve it, and like it has in the Senate, has passed by unanimous consent in the Senate. And so now we're just hoping that's going to happen in the House soon. We got 16 co-sponsors in the last 2 days, which is good. I mean, typically we'll go days without any, or we'll get 1 or 2. But we just signed up the AUSA as an endorser for our organization. We've got a Lieutenant Colonel Mark Holland there who's making some calls on our behalf. And I suspect they may be the reason for the CNN connection. I don't know anybody at CNN, so
Not yet.
Not yet, but I will. But in any case, he may have been responsible for that, or it could be in Senator Ernst's office. There's a Stephen Boline, who is an Army Ranger. He's very, very keen on making this happen. And Jason Crow is an Army Ranger, and I'm sure he wants to have this blessed while he's in office, and show that he was able to push this through. So we've got a lot of things we're working on. And, I'm working the Facebook group. We've got about 1,200 members there. I'm working the 29th Infantry Division Facebook group, about 1,000 people there. Because I'm not sure if I sent this to you or not, but one of the Rangers in the 5th Ranger Battalion was a soldier by the name of, I think his first name was Victor, nickname Doolittle Mooney. No, I'm sorry. Nickname Doolittle, nickname Mooney, last name Lynn, Lynn. He happens to be was the husband of Loretta Lynn. So they've got about 56,000 members in their Facebook group. So I'm trying to get them interested. She's gotten the Presidential Medal of Freedom, I think is what it's called, awarded by Obama. So the last thing she needs is probably another medal, but I'm trying to work that too for her fan base.
That would be the double whammy, because I did read Congressional Gold Medal just to kind of wrap my head around it, and it is like the equivalent of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I mean, it's the highest civilian honor, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, I think there are some people who say that they're equivalent, and there are some people who say that the Congressional Gold Medal, because Congress is representing the nation as opposed to the president, it has a little bit higher honor and value to it. You know, it doesn't make any difference to me as long as they get it.
You have to have a lot of not concessions, but agreement, obviously. When we're talking 2/3 Senate, 2/3 of the House of highly content, think about it, of all things right now, especially with how it's two-party system. It's always like that anyway, but to think that they could at least all agree on something, 2/3 super majority. That's what it is. Super majority.
Exactly.
It's a big deal. It is a big deal for all those people to raise their hand and vote for something like this, because they can't, as you said, there's 40 pending. You can't raise your hand on every single thing, because then it waters it down. It is important.
You know, in my opinion, for what it's worth, having a lot of submissions for the Congressional Gold Medal is a good thing, because you've got a lot of people out there doing good things for this country, and you know they're getting recommended for the Congressional Gold Medal. But I can understand having the value diminished by having 50 groups each year get it. There was another point I was going to make, but my 74 years of age have
probably those 200 plus emails you sent yesterday. That'd wear me out for a few weeks.
Well, it was until 11 o'clock last night. I was pretty worn out, at least my bottom was, by the time I finished that.
Well,
action drives results. Sorry, that's what I was going to say. I'm starting to learn that and figure that out. Action drives results. So not every single letter you're going to get a response, but you just never know.
That's exactly right. And going back to the representatives for just a minute here, they are representing their district, the constituents in their district. So they really need to hear, in most cases, from a number of people in their district that they think this bill should be passed. I can write emails to the military liaison or the legislative assistant, and sort of the typical response, if I get a response back, is they will send that up to the chief of staff, and they will discuss it, in the organization there to see if it's something that their boss wants to co-sponsor or not. Sometimes they will get that. I will get that co-sponsorship immediately. Sometimes it will come later once they see the groundswell of support building. And so that's what we're hoping for now. Again, last time in the 1/16th session, we only got to 142 co-sponsors, and that was in December, just before that session ended. We're at 155 now, and we've got all of next year. So I feel good. I mean, I feel so much better than I did last year when, just getting a lot of support.
Sure. But at the same time, time is of the essence. Clock is ticking. There is an end time where put up or shut up, essentially. And what I would say, for the people you're mentioning about contact your representative, you hear that a lot. Here's what I would say. If someone is interested in this is a cause that they agree with, this is a great way to just figure that process out, which is actually quite simple to contact your congressman. What a lot of people don't know is it's not just you're trying to reach your congressman. No, you're not going to talk to that person specifically, but they have field reps out there, house reps. We always talk about gerrymandering. Well, these districts are pretty big, and they have these little reps that have certain pockets of different counties, and they are people. They're normal people working for a representative, and they are reachable. And what I like about this issue, kind of what you're saying about the gold medal in general, Congressional Gold Medal in general, it is people doing good, just good stuff. And the tough part is who did the best of the good, and so you would think it's bipartisan. It's not something to fight about or nitpick over. And so let's just shine some good light on some areas. And this is a way to do it and to cut your teeth with sort of our elected representative system. We're supposed to give our voice, and then they're supposed to act upon it. So if you want your voice to be heard, you got to speak.
You said it so much better than I could have ever said it. Thank you. I think too, the representatives, you're not going to talk to the representative in most cases. You're going to talk to a receptionist or a staffer there. but they are tasked with keeping information on the call that comes in. What did the person call about? Well, they called about HR 3577. And if they start getting a lot of calls or a lot of emails or letters about that specific bill, then they're going to get excited about it, and they're going to look into it, and they're going to co-sponsor it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, Ron, we'll put the bill number with a little motivation to call or email representatives, as well as the links you sent in the show notes here, and it'll be on YouTube as well. But before we wrap up, is there anything else on this project or anything you'd like to, we missed?
Well, I'm not sure there's anything you missed. I really appreciate time talking to you. If you want to put my email on there, I have no problems at all with that. If somebody has a question and wants to know more about the bill or the process, I mean, I've been doing this now for about 5 years, so I think I finally learned what the process is and how to do it. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has. But again, I really appreciate the time talking to you. It's always good to talk to a younger grad. Just by the way, I don't know if we're still recording or not, but Trey Wheeler, I don't know if you know that name. He was in your class. He went to aviation school. He's from my hometown here, and I ended up writing a nomination letter for him. He was a very good friend of my son's, and Trey, I forget what branch he branched. I know it was aviation, so maybe that was it. But anyway, just wanted to check, see if you know him.
Always worth a shot. But Ron, thank you so much for taking the time, for your service, and for the efforts you're putting into this. And of
Really
course, this
Ron.
weekend, beat Air Force, right?
And then Navy.
And then Navy, absolutely.
I started to put my Beat Navy flag up in the back, and then I decided, well, I may offend some people that see this, so I didn't do it.
It's a line worth crossing.
I agree.
Take a stand. Take a stand.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, very much.